My approach to leadership always has been that it should be reflected through your work. It's not a title, it's not a designation, it's the way you act.
How did you become a software engineer?
So I got interested into computing science a very long ago when I was doing my education, primarily in secondary education. As I finished that, I was interested in computers. I didn't know exactly what it really meant to be into engineering, software engineering, or what kind of roles were going to be out there and all that. But what I knew was that I was going to love computers. I had some first-hand experience at few places, and I thought that this was interesting. And so I decided to take a course which was Bachelor's in Computer Applications. Not many people knew about the course at that time. It was brand new. And it was very risky for me to enroll for it and to go for it. But that's where it started. And from there was no going back. I went ahead, finished the course, and then I did Masters in Computer Applications and got into software engineering world.
Cool. So interesting. So when I did my computer science degree at university, there were 101 people in the course, if I remember right, and there was one lady. So not a lot of diversity. I know this is a topic you're interested in. What was your course like from that respect?
Oh, so my batch had about the same like yours, 100 folks, and there were about 11 girls, I remember, and we used to always sit towards the front of the class because, we were so very few in numbers. But yes, it was about the very same, not one, but we had 11 people, 10, 11 girls in there.
And were there any other noticeable differences in how your course treated men and women?
From the course perspective, I don't think there was any difference the way we were treated, except the fact that we always got the first bench to sit, let's say, or our assignments were always on time and submitted. I think we were very sincere, all of us. And many a times boys would ask for our assignment copies and check with us with what we are doing and all that. But now we talk about it, I recall few times, having difficulties when we were making groups for projects, etc. So, it was difficult to find people who we could engage with and, there was no natural grouping, I would say. But it was not bad as such. We had very good friends among the whole class and we would go together.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know what it was like from your experience, but I think when I went to university, which admittedly is 30 years ago now, in the UK, IT wasn't attractive. I guess a lot of STEM subjects weren't attractive for ladies. They had that very much image of, nerdy blokes like me. How was your experience? Was the same kind of lack of attraction to the industry?
No, that is true. Even not just for the software engineering, but if I go back a little bit, when I took my subjects, when I did the subject selection for my secondary education, then also not many women, not many girls at that time were taking mathematics as their primary subject, right? So the choices were more towards the other subjects, either it's art or drama or a few other things. But attracting women in this field was a bit difficult. STEM subjects were definitely not so popular. Computing science was definitely not. It was not considered as a subject which women could take and be successful and can make a career as well. The kind of examples me or the other women from my generation were given was that it's gonna be hard if you take full-time jobs. It's the jobs are very demanding if you go for any kind of software engineering, and it's going to be hard for you to manage life balance, with kids, with everything. So it was, not, there were not many role models as well, I would say. That was one of my biggest challenge personally. There were not many women I could look up to and could take them as my inspiration and say that this is what I want to become. So I never thought in that way and still went ahead, without thinking, oh, I can't do it because I'm a woman. So I still went ahead with, and even today, I don't make a difference. But then we always need a kind of a psychological safety, need to feel a belongingness.
Yeah.
And when we don't have women role model, it makes it a bit hard to believe that we can also achieve something like that.
So there's a couple of interesting things I wanted to pick up on there. One, the whole children thing. And that's so terrible and so terribly old fashioned. And maybe it's just me, but I'm a dad. I want to spend time with my kids too. I want to, you know,
True.
I would have loved the chance to work 3 day week and spend more time with my kids. And it's so terrible that we've just put that onto, assuming a woman's going to do that and the father isn't interested or won't. It's time society moves beyond that. So that's a great shame. How do we create role models? And how did we lose the fact that there are some good role models for women in computer science? From the Hidden Figures film talks about some of the early ones in NASA. We've got Ada Lovelace, we've got Margot Hamilton again from NASA. We've got a lot of great role models that contributed to computing and software engineering. How do we lose that? How do we forget that they have made such a valuable contribution? How do we bring that forward and share it with women and make it more attractive? And how do we make the whole industry recognize that everybody has something of value to add?
So I think time is now changing, John, if you think about it. These days, if I talk about, let's say, this decade alone, I've seen a number of women taking senior roles, making their mark. A number of founders are, you can find the diversity there. So things are changing. But if I go back to my time when I was growing up, especially I grew up in India, right?
Mhm.
And especially if I talk about the country where I grew up, it was largely men's responsibility to be a breadwinner, right? And it
Okay.
was largely a woman's responsibility to take care of the home, children, their upbringing, house chores, and everything. There was a kind of a segregation between their duties. And if all of the people, all of the girls or boys who were growing up in that age, I think that's what they were looking at. So this is why it was hard at that point in time. Now it's getting better, but if we talk about how we can make it even better for the coming generation, let's say upcoming generation, I think men need to contribute more than women. I think women are now at the point where they are struggling to balance both because their previous generation, let's say, largely, I wouldn't say all, but largely have been focusing on the work related to home, house chores, or taking care of children, etc., while men were out on the job. Now this is changing, but it has not changed 100%. It has not changed completely. Today's men, like yourself, they are very much happy to contribute equally. They want to spend time with their children. They value that, right? They want their partners to equally be successful at their work life, in their career. And no matter what they're doing, they could be teaching job, they could be drama, dance, science, computing, engineering, anything. It could be anything. But they want to support that. And they do understand the importance of it as well. It brings a lot of advancement to the whole family as well. If you think about it, the houses, the homes where females work, I believe they bring a lot back to the family itself. So we need to have more men participating in the house chores or taking care of the kids, and engage more, not just thinking that it's primarily women's responsibility. I'll give you one example. If you think about all of the parent teacher meetings, how many men you see attending them? The very less. It's mostly women, it's mostly moms who are attending. And even, if you look at pickup and drops, I do all the drops for, both my kids. And I always see moms running, whereas there are few dads, but very few, right? So we need to bring a bit more balance over there, I think, in order to let women take the charge of their career, of their success. So we need more men like yourself contributing to this and, build better future generation.
Actually, that's one I can't really comment on personally because all my kids actually homeschool. So I don't do parent-teacher evenings, and
All right. Okay.
they have a very different upbringing to that. So haven't really experienced that or seen it myself.
Yeah.
And it's interesting in the homeschooling community, we do see more of a balance, I think. You see more of a balance of parents being involved.
No, that's great. Great to hear about that. But you can experience it, you can go to any nearby school and then just be there near the time of drop off or pick up. And you can easily notice that you don't have to do much effort to figure the difference out.
Yeah, I can imagine. I try and avoid the local schools at that time, though, because it's absolute chaos of.
Yeah. From that point of view, I get it. Yes.
Yeah, cool. So a slight pivot here. We talked a little bit how you got into software engineering, but you've had quite an interesting career, I think, experiencing a number of different industries. I picked out consulting, health, finance, construction, and now finally a big tech company. What's that journey been like, and what have the experience of each of those companies given you that perhaps is different to the traditional big tech background?
Yeah, I think right now the kind of experience I have at Amazon is very different to the rest of the industry, I would say. The sector didn't matter if I went to healthcare or telecom or finance. Most of the places, the culture was pretty much same. And I also believe that you carry a bit of culture with your own self. You build and create environment around you, and gradually, you start to learn few things from there, and then others start to learn from you as well. But the after I joined Amazon, I found the culture a lot different than the other organizations I worked for. And the main difference came from, I think, the fact that Amazon provides a lot of autonomy at work, which makes a huge difference. I never heard before that, you can act like a mini CEO of the company and you got that kind of responsibility and accountability that comes with the autonomy, right? So it's a risk as well if you think about it. But at the same time, it allows you to think freely, bring more ideas to the table, which people would listen to. And, many a times those ideas are great and, people are ready to work on them, accept them. That's the main difference I felt. But otherwise, everywhere I went, I think I met wonderful people. I made friends at my workplaces. People always say that, workplace is workplace, it's very different to your personal life. But personally, I don't believe in that. The place you spend 8 hours a day is a place where you work with people. And those people sometimes can turn into really good friends of yours for life. I have friends for life from the workplaces I have been to. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm the same. I've got friends I've known for 25, 26 years now that I met at my first or second job. We're still in touch. We're still friends. We've worked together, some of them a couple of other times since when we've had opportunities. I mean, I think it's changing these days, but, with other ways of meeting people. But I do remember seeing a stat once that something like 30% of people met their future partner in the workplace. And again, as you say, we're spending 40 hours a week there. It's a lot of our awake time.
That's a time when you are most active, most
Yeah.
productive hours of the day. You work together, you discuss things, you brainstorm together, you eat together. So it's hard not to make friends at work.
Yeah, absolutely. Which I think brings me nice onto another topic, passionate of mine. I've tried to focus on explaining to many software engineers that technical skills are part of your skill set. And if you want to progress much past mid, early senior, you need to develop your soft skills, or your people skills, or whatever we choose to call them. How do you feel about that? How have you seen that play out in your experience?
First of all, that's 100% true. I don't think it is just your technical skills which can take you to any senior level, not just from junior engineer to senior engineer, or from senior engineer to manager level, or to senior manager level, or to director level. It's not your technical skills. I think the technical skills matter most when you are beginning your career, because then most of the time you're largely being assessed for your technical ability to do your jobs, right? But once you get into any organization, once you start your career really, then it really matters a lot. How do you communicate with each other? What's your behavior like? What's, how much trustable you are, how much dependable you are, how much social you are. How do you present problems? Do you ask questions? There are a number of things which come along with your technical skills to, give you that kind of edge where people start to consider you to be ready for the next level or not. So there are a lot of things which play out, and it's not just the technical skills. It's part of it for sure. There is no denial to it. It's a very important ingredient to your success, but it's definitely not the one on which everything relies on. You have to have a number of things along with that.
Yeah, I sometimes describe it as a hygiene factor, that your technical skills have got to be good enough for the level you're at, but beyond that, to get beyond that, you need to be able to work as a team. You need to be able to engage with people. You need to be able to influence. You need to be able to sell your ideas.
Yeah.
I also wanted to pick up on what you said at Amazon about the ownership. Amazon talks quite a lot about their, I think it's 12 leadership values.
Team,
Day
yes.
one, think of the customer.
Yeah.
So it sounds like your experience is very much that that's not just a post on the wall like it is at some companies, but it's actually playing out at Amazon, and they're following through on that. So that sounds really positive. What do you suggest that other companies or other teams could take from that, and how could they learn to have that sense of ownership and encourage that within their
Sure.
teams and organization?
Yeah. So it's true that Amazon got, say, 14 leadership principles, and they're heavily used even in day-to-day talk when we are looking at a proposal, looking at a design during our meetings, etc. It's kind of impossible that one of the leadership principles would not come in the discussion. We'll say, that as a bias for action, we're gonna do this, or we talk about the trust quite a lot and everything. For the other companies, I I think first of all that most of the organizations, or all of the organizations, they do have their own values or guidelines, some rules of the road kind of things with different names. They're not called leadership principles, but they still do have few things as a guiding principle for everyone. And ownership, I think, uh, mostly I have seen, does sit in there too. It is just the matter of how much you are really focusing and practicing it in your daily life. That's what and where the difference really comes into play. So in order to, if you want to really focus on those values, first of all, you really got to know what is that you want to focus on. Are these the 5 values, 10 values, whatsoever it is? You got to define them clearly and communicate clearly with your team as well. You got to say that this is what we are following. You got to build a culture around those values. And once you do that, like I said, practice in your daily life. Think, if we are abiding by those values, the decisions we are making on a daily basis for our work, are they actually aligned with those values or not? So you got to cross-check that. It begins with the leadership, I believe. Being the leaders, it is our responsibility to actually emphasize on them and help our team adopt them and then practice them, and then make them part of your daily work.
So if I was to sum that up, we could say you've got to live the values yourself as a leader. Okay, cool. We talked a little bit about leadership there, so it would be interesting to hear how, for your career, what made you transition from being an individual contributor to taking on a management role?
Sure. So my first leadership role was actually back in 2006, which is a very long time ago. And the way I transitioned to a leadership role was very natural without even me realizing that. I was an individual contributor to begin with in the company, which is called TCS Tata Consultancy Services. And when I joined that particular team as an individual contributor, I started working with my client and with my team, etc. And in a few months' time, it just happened so that when I met my client and just delivered the first phase of the project, etc., they wanted to invest more in my own project and wanted me to hire a team for myself and wanted me to take the charge of it, lead that. That was the first time when I did not realize what was I doing. It just naturally happened that I was always talking about the project progress, meeting with people, stakeholders, bringing them up to date with anything which was going on. Not just that, highlighting the problems as well, highlighting the risks as well. So a number of things which I was doing right, because of which I naturally got into that kind of role. And from there on, it's not that, title wise, I continued doing the leadership roles. After that, I joined again an individual contributor role. As I moved to US, Virginia, there, and I did back to individual contributor role. Then I moved to India back again and worked for United Health Group. And I started as a senior engineer. And then again moved back to a project lead role where I had 6 people reporting to me. So my approach to leadership always has been that it should be reflected through your work. It's not a title, it's not a designation. It's the way you act. It's the way you take ownership and responsibility and respond to your work is how actual leadership comes into play.
I love that. I love that. That's very similar to a post I wrote 6, 7 months ago where I encouraged every software engineer to step up and be a leader and say, leadership is something you do. It's not a title you're given. And maybe you get made into a manager after you started doing the leadership, but you start doing it first. And you basically just described that situation as exactly what you did. Thinking a little bit about that, for the people that are at that transition of where they're being offered the chance to become a manager or to pursue the IC route, do you have any tips for anybody that's considering which route should they go and isn't certain? And what might they think about? What have you
So
learned from your experience?
yeah, sure. So you can be an IC even in a leadership role. It's not necessary that you have line management of the people. There is a very fine line between being, let's say, principal engineer, who's a senior, which is a senior position, and being an engineering manager, who's responsible to work along with principal engineer and along with the team to deliver for the business objectives. Now, the way to choose between these two kind of different lines where you want to have line management of some people deliver along with the teams, with your team reporting to you, let's say working along with you, and the other role where you are working really as an individual contributor, you would still have a lot of responsibility for the work, for the project delivery, etc. But that would be a very different kind of role. The way to choose between the IC role or a manager role, let's say, is to think what you really like to do. If you like to empower the people and deliver along with them and move to a role where you would be responsible for others, not just empowering the people, but just think about their own careers, give them career progression, then you got to think if you really like that kind of role, you may like that. But if you think you're not a person who would like to you know think about others career primarily, it's like it's not that you're completely away from helping others. You still do in that kind of IC role when you even if, when you're a senior role, senior level, but you still got to work more towards maybe just technology deliverables, etc. But you are less responsible for career progression of the people who are working in your team. That's the main difference. At one point, if you think, let's say, a couple of levels above, there comes a time when you are eventually responsible for people's career progression as well as the whole project and the delivery. You got to contribute to the vision of the company, you got to contribute to the goals, you got to contribute to the roadmap planning, etc. So at some point, I believe the IC role and the manager kind of role, they combine together and you start to do both at some point. But otherwise, it's somewhere in between in your career. You can choose if you want to stay at the IC track or you want to go for a management track.
So I could maybe sum that up as when you're going staff principal engineer, you're focused on growing the technology and leading the technology side, where if you choose the EM, senior EM, and that way you'll focus on growing the people and growing the team and developing them.
Yeah.
So it will depend whether you're more driven by the technology, say, or driven by empowering and growing people.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a right way to sum it up. Yes.
Okay, cool. So I find that a difficult one personally, and that's probably why I've switched back and forth between the two at times, because I've had some engineers I worked with since they were junior and then our staff or above level, and I've really enjoyed being part of that journey and helping them. But equally as much, I've really enjoyed building technology, and I think that's probably why I've gone back and forth between the two. Have you seen many people do a similar thing along the way, or have you seen people be more successful by sticking to one career track?
In my view, I think I have seen people more sticking to one track, but I have seen people finding it difficult to let one thing go and just hold on to the other thing. I have been in that boat quite a lot, I have to admit. During my time at JP Morgan, it happened quite a lot that I had a number of people reporting to me. And at the same time, I was deeply engaged with all of the technical stuff. I was doing the AWS migration, looking at all the services, doing the designs all by myself, and yet I had a large number of people reporting to me in the phone book. So I was responsible for their career progression. And eventually I came to one point where I talked to my manager and I said, I think I'm not doing justice to one or the other role. And I did a lot of overtime as well because I was trying to balance both and I did not want to let either of them go away. So, I corrected my own mistake. I discussed with my management and I said, I got to pick up one. And I think I know what I want to pick up. So we have to create some kind of balance, some kind of restructuring and all that, which we did. But I think this is the kind of a struggle where most of the people go through it, especially the ones who go to the management kind of role. Because being a engineering manager, it's hard to let things go which you have been hands-on, to understand that it's okay not to code few days or for a very long time because you're focusing on the other things. You're focusing on the strategy, you're focusing on the roadmap, career discussions, etc. So it takes a while to get used to it, but once you have learned it, I think it really helps to take your own career forward.
Absolutely, I agree. I think one of the challenges that some people see there is that if you now look at quite a few job specs for senior engineer management, even I picked out one last year for VP engineering, the job spec said nothing about leadership. It was all about, can you talk UDP? Can you describe TCP/IP? Can you talk about socket programming and when you'd use select versus? I was like, this is a VP engineering role, and I know the company. I know that this role will manage a team of well over 100 people. Why does it say nothing about leadership? So I think it's quite an easy trap to fall into, particularly perhaps with the layoffs at the moment, for people who are following that management trap to kind of want to stay technical and overly focus on it, because when they face the risk of perhaps being made redundant, having to look again, we have too much technical stuff on the job specs and not enough leadership. So, talk us about your transition to leadership. The other thing that's quite a hot topic at the moment was a study from somebody at Stanford that talked about 10% of employees are ghosts and not contributing. And the trouble with this study is they just looked at Git commits. And that forgets that, I think as you talked about it earlier, when you're at staff principal level, you're doing some kind of leadership work. You're not just cutting code. And again, there are a lot of people in teams that maybe they pair or mod program, or there are people in teams who are focused on how do we sort out the documentation? How do I enable people? How do I coach and mentor other people? And all these things are not going to produce Git commits. So what's your approach been to looking at how well your engineering team is working? How have you been assessing your team, both as individuals and the success of the team?
I think it's definitely not the code commits. I personally don't believe in that. It's like your 5 lines of code can be much more important or complex than thousands lines of code, right? So I don't think that's really a good measure for the performance evaluation of anyone. And like you said, like if you talk about the senior positions, principal engineers, or even the senior engineers in the team, many a times I have seen them much more engaged and spending time in analyzing things, designing things, rather than just writing the code. Writing code is like 20% of the overall SDLC. We keep forgetting that, right? That's a very old thing to just, and it holds true. And in today's world, if you think about it, there are a lot of tools, AI, helping to write you the code. You get the syntax very easily. You just got to think what is right to actually put in there in terms of the work you need to your code needs to produce. So it's definitely not the topmost criteria, at least, right? If consistently somebody is not producing any code at all, then you got to think, has their job role is changed? Is there something else they're investing so much, or what's going on? But for a short duration, if or a decent duration, if somebody is not producing the code, it could easily be the number of other things they are engaging with. So one of the topmost criteria which I always look at is, from performance evaluation point of view, is the number of deliverables, and it could be any deliverables. It could be the projects they have got into production, and it's not necessarily production because there could be things in the test environment which are not going to production for some reasons which the person is not responsible, right? So have they been able to deliver? What kind of designs they have produced? What kind of inputs they have given? Or if there are any proposals they have worked on? So any shape and form of deliverable towards the roadmap is definitely a criteria for the performance. Then there are a number of other things. If I talk about Amazon specifically, let's say number of leadership principles again play a role, right? Can you trust the person? Have they built the trust within the team or outside the team? Do they communicate well with the stakeholders within the team, outside the team? And do they take the action when it is required? That do they have the call for action? There are situations where you just can't keep sitting. You either, there is a one-way, two-way door, very popular from Jeff Bezos, right? So did they pick a door or just kept sitting there idle, is still thinking, is still, overthinking some of the ideas? So a number of things play the role in there. And specifically, if I talk about Amazon, it's largely the leadership principles and the deliverables, which speak for a person's performance.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, I think that's something that we forget a lot in a lot of software engineering, is that there are more deliverables than just code.
Yeah.
There's so much more we need, whether it's tests, whether it's documentation, whether it's figuring out if we shouldn't do something, whether it's producing some data to actually allow us to make a data-driven decision. You mentioned mentoring there. That's something I feel is very strongly about. And again, I've encouraged software engineers that once they get past senior, mid, or early senior, they should be mentoring others, because it's part of that growing into leadership. It's part of learning useful soft skills, people skills, whatever we call them. And also, when you mentor and teach others, you learn a lot and you reinforce your knowledge. What's your feeling about that? What advice do you have to software engineers about whether they should or should not mentor?
I think mentoring is something which is so underrated even today. A lot of people have started to talk about mentoring, and even on the social media, you would see a lot of mentors now available you can speak to, not just within your organization, but outside the organization as well. I think this is such an important aspect to consider when you are thinking not just about the others, but your own growth too. Being a mentee or being a mentor, it helps immensely in my view. People don't realize that they can start mentoring at any stage of their career. They don't really have to be senior engineers or managers or principal or staff engineers or directors to mentor someone. You can start mentoring folks from college when you have, let's say, got your first job, right? You can help them understand what your career journey has been, what you have done to actually get your first job, what kind of prep you have done. There is a lot you can give back to others. Same goes to the senior engineer level. You can always give back to people. Now, and it's for every level, like I said. Now there is one thing which is again super important to understand, is that when you mentor people, you learn a lot from them too. People usually think, oh, I'm mentoring someone, so I'm just giving my time to someone to help them grow. It's it's not true. There are a number of things you can learn from your mentee during your discussion. It has happened with me every time, every single time I meet a mentee. There is something which I get out from that discussion for my own self, for my growth. I don't know if you're going to believe it or not, but recently written a book which is called Awesome Tech Interviews. I still have just a soft copy of it. I'm working on the paperback. But it was earlier during this year that I was talking to one of my mentee. I thought I was helping him, but towards the end of the session, he left me thinking that why I'm not writing my own book. And that's when I got into it. So you never know, what you will get out of these discussions, but it's a two-way conversation. So always try, if you can, to mentor someone and to have mentor for yourself as well. That's another thing. At certain point, we start to think, oh, we don't need mentor at this level because I have got these many years of experience. I have learned so much. So why do I need a mentor? We all need mentors, every one of us, and at each stage of our life and careers.
Yeah, absolutely. We can all benefit from being both sides of that relationship, can't we? So I'd love to talk about the book and technical interviews in a moment. Before we do, another thing that comes up when people look for mentors is they look for the perfect mentor. What's your view on that? Do you need a perfect mentor or something different?
So I don't think you need a perfect mentor. It's hard to define what that perfection would look like in a mentor, right? Sometimes you got to try, and it could be that you don't get things out of that conversation which you were looking for, and you can be open and honest about it. It is good to have someone, if you're talking about your career, let's say, it's good to have someone who has been on that path, on that journey. If I'm an engineering manager, let's say, I would try to have someone at, let's say, a director position who has been into engineering role in their life. And that could help me to see if I can track, navigate my career in that direction, following their footprints, or if I can get something from their own learnings, I can learn from their failures or their success. So it's good to have that kind of view when you're going to pick up your mentor. Sometimes it is also important to see if they can understand where you're coming from. So I always try to have some mentors who are within my organization so that they understand what I'm talking about, what the cultural values are, how the company policies work, and et cetera, et cetera. And that helps to have the discussion. It's kind of a smooth conversation between two people. But many a times, it's also important that the person you're talking to, they're agnostic of your work environment. They can give you the independent advice. They can listen to you, not knowing the background, and then just give you the advice and suggestion based on that. So it's really, I would say, depends on kind of progress you are trying to make with your mentor, the kind of topics you want to pick up to discuss with them. And then you can just give it a try. If it doesn't work, just, try something different.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I also think that we forget that we can have more than one mentor. There's not a limit. As long as you can find or you can pay the people to give you mentoring, you can find 2 or 3 different mentors and perhaps instead of looking for the perfect one, pick one that's going to mentor you on, say, how to be a director level leader. Pick maybe somebody that can mentor you on Amazon culture, for example. And then you could have maybe somebody that's going to mentor on you on, I don't know, some particular technology you wish to learn and develop about. There's the sense that we have to get one person that does it all is, I think, holding too many people back rather than try a few people, experiment and find different areas. And as you progress in one area, maybe put the emphasis on something else for a change and pick somebody else in that area. Cool. So you mentioned your book. And one of the questions that I wanted to ask, and I'm conscious we're coming up to the end of the time that I'd asked you for, is how do you advise people to approach technical interview? What are the kind of 2 or 3 top takeaways that they would get from reading your book?
So I think the first thing for anyone who is appearing for any kind of interviews, they should really focus and understand the kind of technical skills they need for any interview. There is no substitute for that. right? If I'm an engineer, let's say, and I'm going to appear for a Java developer position, then I need to know my tech. I need to know the programming language for which I'm going to be interviewed for. That's number one. So be good at that. Number two, which most of the people, again, forget about, or it's underrated or not talked about much, is the behavioral aspect of the interviews. And that starts from the very point you're actually putting up your application for any job. You talk about yourself, right? The first question most of the people, or in every interview, get asked for is, tell me about yourself, or what is that I don't know about yourself, which is not there in your resume. The kind of questions, it's your introduction, it's your elevator pitch. So if you don't have your 1 to 2 minutes of elevator pitch ready to speak, it's very hard for the other person to know what more is about you for them to learn. Right? The resume is in front of every interviewer. They can see that. But the way you present yourself is very different. Then there comes a number of different questions. Once you clear your technical interview, let's say, even for a developer position, you've got to go for the behavioral rounds or management rounds. Different organizations name them differently, but the purpose of them is to figure out if you are a culture fit person, if you're going to come to the organization and be successful. It goes back to our previous question where we were saying that, um, just the technical skills which are necessary to go to the next level, or is it something more? It's definitely always something more. It's about your attitude to learning. It's about your willingness to work, your dedication, what you bring to the table to discuss the ideas. And all of that is part of the behavioral aspect, right? That covers the behavioral interview sets, which you get into. So it's quite important to understand that too. And these days, a third thing, which has become quite important because so many organizations have started conducting, is the system design interview. I still don't think it applies to the junior level engineers, but I'm seeing the trend changing because even for the technical interviews, they invite people for system design and then they get into the kind of details. So which database you're going to pick up and why, what are the benefits, this and that. And through that, they're trying to figure out how much you really know about databases, for example. So the third type is a system design interview. It is also applicable for many of the senior positions. If you talk about the engineering managers, they also go through the system design interviews. I went through it when I appeared for Amazon's interview. So now connecting back to my book covers these three parts, system design interviews, behavioral interviews, and the DSA part of it, the data structure and algorithm. It does not cover a lot of how to prepare for or how to appear for Java interview, let's say, a particular programming language, but it's at a level above where it talks about the DSA and provides you a roadmap to navigate, to learn through. Right. So that's what it is about. The intent was to put a guide together, which is kind of a one-stop shop for anyone who's in an engineering role or engineering management role and going for the interviews. It's also helpful for solution architects or the architects, designers, etc. So they can, refer it and definitely can get things out of it, at least for the behavioral part. It applies to everyone, every position. That was my intent when I started writing this.
Cool. Thank you very much. So we're coming to the end of our hour. Are there any final tips then that you'd like to share with people that can help them move their career through? We talked about how beneficial mentoring can be. If you've got the interview book that would really help them with that. Anything else that would really stand out?
I think there is one thing which I would highlight, which we did not get the chance to touch upon, is the value of networking. I learned it very late in my career, frankly speaking. I was not a very outgoing person, and being a woman again, I missed out a lot of late evenings, parties, etc. But later half of my career, I started focusing on networking and started building my relationship with a number of people, and that helped me quite a lot.